Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Marketing and Branding webinar for our USAGSO volunteers. I'm Amanda Newcomb, and joining me today is my colleague Andrea Holt.
Hi.
Hi, Andrea. Andrea and I are actually the two members of USAGSO's small but mighty, I guess, marketing and communications team. Um, and if you can change the screen, Andrea, on today's call, um, we will do a quick overview of USAGSO's style and branding guidelines. The focus of this discussion is to provide guidelines to our volunteers to ensure there's a consistent brand or voice being used across our 90 plus countries. And also that this brand is consistent with what is being used at GSUSA and stateside councils. Andrea, I lost the present. There it is. Okay.
Sorry.
That's okay. Also, we will go into an overview of USAGSO's guidelines that are really specific to the Girl Scout overseas environment, those things that make us a bit special or unique from councils in the United States. We will touch base on our social media guidelines and recommendations for our overseas communities as they manage their local social media pages. And then we'll have time for questions and comments at the end of the presentation. However, we'll accept questions throughout the training in the question box on the right-hand side of your screen. So feel free to type in your questions as you have them, and we will try to respond to them during the Q&A section. We really do appreciate and welcome your feedback. This is something that Andrea and I have been working on together, and the first time we're really sharing it with our volunteers. So it's important that we hear from you if there are things that you have questions about or things that maybe we didn't think about that we need to add or update. So we really appreciate your attendance during this webinar, but really do would love to hear from you. Okay. So next
There you go.
slide is yours.
Okay, so we're going to jump right into the part that I'm a big nerd about, the style and branding, making sure that we're speaking with one voice. I tried not to overload you with text. This whole section is broken down into much more detail in the branding guidelines document that we'll show you later. But just some basics are making sure that we're all doing the same thing for capitalization and titles. Things like Girl Scout Gold Award, Girl Scout Silver Award, anything that's an official Girl Scout thing needs to be capitalized. Journeys needs to be capitalized. And then you see over on the far right where it says Troop 12345 North Pole Community. The community name and the troop name will need to be capitalized if it's followed by a number. If it's just our cadet troop, if you say that, then the word troop would need to be lowercase. Symbols and punctuation, I should have said also numbers. There's a specific way of writing that if you're writing things out in a paragraph or on a flyer, that if it's 11 and up, it'll need to be numerical. If it's 10 and below, it'll need to be written out. Also, the first number of every sentence, even if it's the number 50. If it's the beginning of a sentence, it should be written out, or spelled out, I should say. We try to avoid superscript. So I know a lot of times when we write dates, we like to include the superscript, but that's one thing to avoid. And then there's more description in the branding guidelines about periods, commas, quotation marks, and things like that. Another thing to always make sure to write out is when you're talking about scouting as a whole, it's still always make sure to say Girl Scouts or Girl Scouting and not just Scouts or Scouting without the word girl. We want to make sure that we're always including that. And other things like Camp Lochenwald or the upcoming Camp Tama, it needs to be written out as USA Girl Scouts oversees Camp Lochenwald or Camp Tama, at least for the first time that it's mentioned in some sort of publication or flyer. And then another thing, it's going to sound kind of silly, but instead of using the word training, we want to make sure that we're using volunteer learning opportunities, because then it really showcases what the purpose is behind what you're doing. And then, again, as I said, all of the details are actually in the style and branding guidelines, and you can read all of that thoroughly through there. Now the fun stuff. The official Girl Scout colors, I'm sure you're all very familiar with the colors. Girl Scout green, it's an official color that Girl Scouts actually have a right to. And if you notice, when you'll get these slides later, and these are also provided in the branding guidelines that are on, we'll show you where to access them. But they all have, if you see in the upper right-hand corner, it has all the different codes. So there's the CMYK code, the PMS code, the RGB, and then the HTML code. So these are things that you can actually put into, say that you're using Word or PowerPoint, and you want to change the color of some font. You highlight it, select the colors, and if you don't know how to change it to the specific color, you just select custom color. And for things like Microsoft Office products, it'll usually ask for the RGB. It'll give you the broken down of how much red, how much green, and how much blue, and then you'll get the exact color that you're looking for. Moving on to more colors are the grade level colors and then other colors that are also used. So this way, I mean, of course, you're free to use the colors that you want in the flyers that you're making, but this way it's consistent. It's consistent with the flyers that I make. I only use these colors, and it's consistent with the flyers that GSUSA makes. Anything in the text, the borders, if you add any kind of like a doodle or a hand-drawn cartoon kind of thing, you can specify which colors. And so here are all the codes for you as well. This is the fun stuff for me. Okay, graphics and branding for the actual branding marks. So there's lots of different options. There's the trefoil, there's the service mark, which the face is facing sideways. That by itself is called the profile. There's the lockup, which includes USA Girl Scouts Overseas below Girl Scouts or below the service mark. And then there's the GSO graphic that I created that's just for funsies. Things to make sure not to do is don't use the image metaphorically or in place of something else. So the trefoil shouldn't be turned into a smiley face, or it shouldn't be used to create like a flower clip art kind of thing. And you don't want to use it as a frame, like how it's shown in the image there with the photo of the girls there, and then you don't want to change the color. The trefoil is something that is copyrighted. It's a brand, and we want to make sure that we are using that, and that's a symbol that people around the world recognize, and we want to keep it that way. Also, things should not be stretched or skewed, as like how I showed the service mark down below. And for the lockup is for official councils only. So just make sure that you're not adding your community name to it. This is something that, just like the service mark in trefoil, is complete art, and it's provided in its final form. You don't want to add your community name to it because it's just for councils, and we're technically at the council level. And then for the GSO graphic, I just showed changing the colors and adding the community name to the middle of the trefoil. That's also something that you don't want to do. If you're going to use the GSO graphic, please use the image as it's provided. Okay. Hey, Amanda, have any questions come through, or should I just keep rolling right through?
We do have a question. Is the proper plural forms of things included in the full branding guideline?
I am looking through it right now, and it does not look like it.
So that's something we can probably add.
Yeah, that's something that we can add, and then also we can get with whoever asked the question later to see if there's a specific term that she's asking for.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Cool.
Alrighty.
Moving on. Okay, so for the font, yes, there is a Girl Scout font, but the other font that you're also able to use is Arial, because most computers come stock with Arial. So that one is the font or a typeface that GSUSA has decided is the official font that's used as the other font. And it can be used in plain, italicized, bold, underline. As long as it's Arial, you're good to go. The other font is called trefoil, and it's actually created by Girl Scouts. And then when you're using photos and flyers, you want to make sure that they actually are using photos everybody says, photos speak 1,000 words. And so this way you want to use the correct photo, essentially, for the message that you're trying to get across. If you're going to use a photo that's 80% girl, 20% background, then it feels more immediate and personal. It's much more in tune, I guess you should say. And then for 20% girl, 80% background, it's got a sense of possibility. It's like it's showing the bigger picture, and it showcases the activities. So this is a good opportunity to use pictures where it's girls camping and everything's kind of in the distance, but 20% of the photo is girls. But that's a good way to show that. So if you're going to put photos in a flyer, it's good to use the 80-20 rule. And down there in the yellow, you can see that it says avoid clip art whenever possible. Use photography or illustration. So that's where some people may have some confusion about the difference between clip art or doodles or illustrations in that sense. You'll see in the flyers, if you've seen any of the flyers that I've created, a lot of the things that look kind of like clip art are actual illustrations that that I received from GSUSA, so they are approved. But if you think of the type of clip art that you see in Microsoft Word or those sorts of things, those are the images that you want to avoid using. If you find images that look more hand-drawn or that are just sketched, you can find images that are copyright free on Google, and that's something that's also a possibility. Alrighty, so that was it for the style and branding guidelines, real quick. But if you have any questions, we can answer them in the Q&A section at the end. And then there are more details in the style and branding guidelines that we will show you later. So if you want to take it away, Amanda, it's your turn.
Okay. So the special guidelines, as I mentioned earlier in the call, at USA, Girl Scouts Overseas, we often talk about how we are special because everything is organized a little bit differently than stateside councils. This is nowhere more apparent than in our overseas naming conventions. In the United States, councils are their own entity, their own legal entity, while USAGSO operates very similarly to a council. We are actually a program of GSUSA. Given this distinction, we do not refer to ourselves as a council. However, when you read materials and see the word council, you can infer that it means the office and staff of USAGSO. In order to create consistency across our membership, we refer to all of our overseas locations as communities. So the correct naming convention for your community is what you see on the screen: USA Girl Scouts Overseas - community name, such as North Pole, or I can community name Paris, community name Singapore. USA Girl Scouts Overseas should always be in the reference to your community. So please do not use names like Daran Girl Scouts or North Pole Girl Scouts. It should always be USA Girl Scouts Overseas - community. For further understanding, an overseas community is similar to a service unit at a stateside council, if you're familiar with how councils in the United States are set up. When you refer to the program and work in your overseas location, please call it USA Girl Scouts Overseas - community name. If you are required to use the word council, again, please note that this will reference the staff and offices of USA Girl Scouts Overseas. Okay, next slide, please, Andrea. Okay, so in the world of nonprofits, acronyms are so typically prevalent, and it's the same here at USA Girl Scouts Overseas or USAGSO. We have GSUSA, which stands for Girl Scouts of the USA, the headquarters of USAGSO. We have OC, which means Overseas Community, and that leads me to the OCMT, or Overseas Committee Management Team, which is quite a mouthful. Most of our overseas locations have an OCMT, and this volunteer team supports the troops and operations of the OC, or overseas community. Leading the OCMT is the OCC, or Overseas Committee Chair. And we totally understand the need to use acronyms in any of your communications, but please always spell it out in the first reference. Per GSUSA brand requirements, the term Girl Scouts itself does not have an acronym. So please always spell it out and never use just GS. Okay, next slide. This brings me to some specific guidelines and recommendations around community websites and social media platforms. So while a committed volunteer may develop and support a great website in your community, when they leave, the website quickly becomes out of date and it can cause confusion to new or potential members. Additionally, new international data security laws require much stricter compliance with any online presence. And because legally our communities fall under USAGSO and GSUSA, we assume responsibility for them and to all international data security laws. In this ever-changing world, monitoring sites to ensure compliance with all applicable laws is costly, time-consuming, and not really feasible for USAGSO or GSUSA staff. So starting in 2019, we kindly ask that our overseas communities remove their community website or make those sites private. Understanding that there are valid reasons for having a public website, we will allow for some exceptions. So to request an exception to this requirement, please contact me and Andrea and USAGSO at marcomm@usagso.org. So that email address is marcomm, MARCOMM, @usagso.org. And you'll see that, and you'll also see a way to access that email address after this presentation. Prior to setting up a website for your community, or if you have a current community website, if you do not contact us with your exception request, you will be considered out of compliance with USAGSO and will need to remove all trademark images from your website. If trademark images is found on an unapproved website, we may ask you to shut down your website. We truly do not want to be punitive in any way, and we'll work with your community if you express a need for a community website. Really please let us know and we will work with you on a solution. Next, please. Okay, so social media. Similar to community websites, a committed volunteer may develop and support a great social media platform for your community, but when they leave, the page quickly becomes out of date, and again, can cause confusion with new or potential members. We have found many outdated and or multiple Facebook pages for the same communities. So we ask that you just let us know about your existing social media pages, and or if you plan on starting a new social media page. We have a quick online form that you can fill out just for us to be able to track this. By letting us know, we hope to curtail the confusion and duplicative pages. Additionally, we would love to hear if you have any recommendations on how to ensure social media pages are kept current. You are volunteers, you're the ones who are in the field doing this, so if there's a way, if you have any suggestions that you would love to share with us, please let us know, either during today's call or through email. Okay, thanks. Andrea, it's over to you.
Alrighty. So we did have a few questions come in about the website stuff. Did you want to save that till the end or answer now?
Let's save that till the end just so we can make sure that we get through. We have 10 more minutes on the calls just to make sure we make it through the presentation. Okay.
So for the social media guidelines, come on screen. All right, there we go. So where can you connect? So we have lots of places. Please note that at the top I did say council-wide Girl Scout volunteer community. I meant that as USAGSO. I need to change that text. So we have several areas that are for public access, meaning that even people who are not involved in Girl Scouts have a way to see us. So there's the Facebook page, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. The Instagram account that it's still getting up and running, it's slowly moving along. We now also have a LinkedIn account and our YouTube channel. The YouTube channel has a lot of training videos on it, so that's more specific. And then just for volunteers, I recognize a lot of the names in here attending this webinar that many of you are in one or both of these groups. So the OCMT Facebook group and the volunteer Facebook group, and these are all links. And these are also available in the documents on the branding guidelines that you'll have later. So best practices for OCMTs and troops. When it comes to social media, there's always the possibility of a Facebook group or a Facebook page. So it's really what you want to portray. So there's Facebook group, it can be made private, closed, secret. I know so many areas that have a group for parents, a group for troop leaders, a group for the community as a whole, a group per troop, depending on how large that community is. So I know there's many areas that actually utilize this function very, very well, but there's also the public page. So that's something that you always have to consider with who is the audience. So this might be people like you want to make sure that you're sharing photos or activities of troops doing things that those girls' grandparents can see because they're not in the closed groups. So naming your group or page is very important. You want to make sure that you're using your full community name. This way you're within branding guidelines, but also that way we know it's the most up-to-date and current version, because there are so many other versions or groups or pages out there. Your community might be one that has an old account that you don't have access to. So if you use one that has the full community name, we'll know that that one's the most up-to-date. Managing your page, one of the main things that I like to consider is using the main USAGSO email address as the login, or if you're not using that as the login already, then you can change it or make it as the forgot password email address. That way, if there is some sort of changeover, if you have a last minute move, that way people who are taking over for you will have access to it, even if it wasn't left behind somewhere. Privacy and safety, this one is huge. So names, locations, photo release. What I mean here is that when you're using the names of girls, you want to make sure that you're using first names only. At max, you can also use a last initial, but please, please do not use full names. I know many of you wouldn't dare do that anyway, but I have to say it out there. Locations, you can say the locations of where events are happening. So say that you have a recruitment event happening, of course you can say where it's happening. That's a location that you want people to come to. But make sure that you're not putting specific addresses if the girls are having a sleepover or something like that. If they're doing a sleepover at one of the girls' houses or something like that, of course, that's not something you want to share. And if you are posting photos in a public manner, make sure that the girls who are shown in the images have photo releases. And then the appropriateness of your content. You want to make sure that you ask yourself, is the information or images that you're sharing, is it appropriate for a stranger to see on my page? Because the public pages, anybody can see those. So that's pretty much it for the social media section, and we can go ahead and show you that we have what Amanda has developed as the Volunteer Brand Center. So this is where you can access those documents that we spoke about, and then also some quick guidelines that if you just need like a short version, a short refresher, that it's right there in front of you. So let me get that for you to see. I meant to link the image, but this is what the landing page of that looks like. Let me get it for you. Come on, computer.
So you can find this page in the volunteer section of the website under resources and training, and it's the brand center, volunteer brand center. You can access the guidelines that we touched on today. All of the information we covered in the webinar is now online and ready for you guys to look at. You can also download our lockups, graphics, or GSUSA trefoils and service marks. We plan to add more to this page, and if you have suggestions on what you think is needed, let us know. But everything that we talked about today is now ready for you guys to see and access right on our website. So we can now move into the question and answer section of the
Yes, we can do that. So let's move on there. So question log. All right, so going back to website things, there was a question. Does the removal of websites include digital newsletters? That's a good question.
That's a good question. And it depends on, no, I would say no. Make sure that you're following the branding guidelines that we shared during today's call. But it depends. There's a lot of things in with the new data laws that we are still learning about what that covers. So I will let you know if there's anything specific about digital newsletters, but at the moment, no, that's fine to continue using digital newsletters.
Right. And I think that an easy fix to it could be to maybe save them as PDFs or downloadable images, and then you can put them into a cloud drive of sorts. That way they're private, and only folks that have the link to it can access it. So then that would be okay. Another question that came in was, can we have a website that is both public and private?
At the moment, we are going to, well, again, we can talk to you specifically about what your community needs, and work on this on a community by community basis. Of course, our recommendation right now is that no, we want to have, we really don't recommend having community websites, but we do know that there are certain communities that this just isn't going to work for them, and so we'll work with you on that.
Okay. All right, next question. Where will this presentation be available after the call? We have a leader meeting next week, and I would like to present this information at it.
Well,
do you want to post it on the Volunteer Brand Center, or?
Yeah, sure. We can post it on the Volunteer Brand Center, so the recording itself. We can also put it up on our YouTube page, and we can email it out to everyone who attended the call.
Yep.
Or signed up for the call.
That works.
So you'll get in many places.
Yes, we have access to several areas. Actually, should I stop recording since it's in the question section? The next question is, do you have the ability to remove old Facebook pages? It's been tried. I've heard of both success and non-success in that aspect. It is difficult too because Facebook is not known for their customer service abilities. So that is something that unfortunately is a hit or miss. And then also because their argument is that if you're not the person who created it, then you don't have access to it or you don't have rights to it. So we have tried and we will continue to try, at least from our level.
And if you come across an old Facebook page that you know is no longer active, just let us know, and we can see what we can do about that.
Okay, if our Facebook group is secret, should it still have the full community name? That's something I didn't think about. I mean, if it's secret, no one's seeing it but the people who are in it. Ideally, I would say yes, just to make sure that you're in compliance and you're used to doing it. But if it's a secret group, I can't find it, and so I think that one should be okay then, if it's secret. See, do we need to have a photo release for our community, or is this something that GSO is collecting during registration/renewal? Amanda, do you know if that's something that's in the registration process?
It is part of the registration process. So parents opt in or opt out when they register on the online system. And I think that also the image, it's always good to have multiple release forms signed, but sometimes you have people who maybe are participating as a tag along or not a member of Girl Scouts. And so if you want to access the image release consent form, then that is on the Brand Center.
Yes. And also, it would be helpful at the beginning of the year. What I've heard are some best practices from some other areas. What they have done is they create a list of the girls who whose parents have opted them out of being in photos. And what they do with them is they'll put like a dot sticker or something on their shoulder. So that way, whoever is taking photos that day will know to only get that girl from the back so that her face is not shown. Or when you're sorting through all these photos, you can see if her face is showing and she's got that sticker on her shoulder, that you know you can't use that photo unless if it's on the edge and you're able to crop it or something like that. So that's a possibility. Okay, so can more approved photographs and graphics that are already created be provided in the OC Google Drives? I can put some images in the Google Drive. A lot of the images that I have are older photos. But yes, I can put some in there, at least ones that are good enough quality.
Yeah, and we've gotten this request a few times from other volunteers, and I understand that it's good to have that high quality image. And so a lot of some of the images that we use that are really high quality are from GSUSA. So that is something that we can request, is what photos can we share with our volunteers to be able to use in their own materials. Since it's not ours, we would need their approval to share them publicly.
Yep. And then the last thing that came in looks like a question/suggestion for Facebook. Perhaps you could approach from the trademarked image use you were discussing for shutting them down. If they have an unapproved trademarked name/images use, perhaps that's an approach for compelling the old pages to be closed. There's an old one for Ansbach, and I've tried to contact whoever owns it, but never got a response. So that is something that we can consider.
Yeah, that's a really good suggestion. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, that was the last of the questions in the question log. So if there are any other questions, go ahead and type them in now while we are here.
Or you can, on the Volunteer Brand Center, you can access the marcom at usagso.org email address.
Yes.
And always shoot us an email if you have any questions on branding or what you heard today. We'd love to hear from you, and your information only helps us improve our work. So we really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for joining us wherever you are in the world. And hopefully this was helpful information for you and you'll be able to share it with your teams. Oh, we did have one just pop in saying I'm on the volunteer tab of the website and I don't see the brand center. So let me show you how to access that real quick. Okay, so I'll just go from the very start. So here we're on the main page of the website. Go to volunteer. Oh, you're right. It's a hidden tab. I forgot. Or is it under resources?
It's under resources and training.
Okay, so you go to volunteer here, and then here where it says resources and training, you click there. And there's the volunteer brand center. Right there, you click there. And then here it is. So here on the page, you'll have access to the branding guidelines, the special guidelines or naming convention guidelines, and the social media guidelines. We have them broken down in separate documents so that it wasn't in an overwhelming one large document for you. The basic checklist for branding if you're making your own flyer, just quick things to double check. And then we also do have the images here that are available for you to download for you to use. And then photography recommendations, just to give you that. And then this is where you can find the image release consent form link. Some insignia placement, sensitive issues. So if you get contacted by somebody, you can contact us, let us know. Social media and community websites, this is the breakdown of that information that we covered. There is the email address, just to remember, marcom at usagso.org. And then the forms to let us know if you're going to create social media, if you're going to create a platform, just fill this form out. And then if you already have one, you can complete this form just so that we have tracking, just so that we know who has what, where. Okay. Alrighty. Well, then that concludes this presentation for the marketing and branding guidelines for volunteers.
Thank you guys for attending. We really appreciate it. And really do please contact us if you have any feedback. We do like to hear from you. Okay, thank you.